Hi, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining from the world. Um, Thank you for joining today. We are going to start promptly and people can join as they arrive. Um, I just want to say thank you very much for joining. Just having a group of this size register and attend today is really the first step in trying to improve accessibility and inclusion for our member firms across the financial services industry. So I consider you all kind of change makers and ambassadors by joining today. For those that don't know me, my name's Adam Della. I work at DWS. I head their global early careers function and their TA operation function. Um, and from a inclusion in finance perspective, I co-lead their disability community who've been championing this initiative that we're going to start today. We've been working as a community for a while to try and support member firms when it comes to disability awareness, or as we'll see today, kind of more focus on accessibility awareness. And we do really feel that the time has come for this to be a real proper conversation. The individuals that will take you through the session today will share more around kind of legislation and regulation, but also kind of the social impact of that. Just a reminder that today is the first part of a three-part series. We've partnered with an organisation called With Not For. We're really excited to have them deliver to you today. It's a disability-led organisation. They're really experienced and they've worked with some really large organisations such as Channel 4. Um, so hopefully you'll find the session really engaging. You'll have a chance to learn more around disability, the language, neurodiversity, accessibility. And if you find yourself inspired or you want to get more involved, you'll also hear about the opportunities to do that as well. So just a few words that I want to say at the beginning, but I'm quite happy to hand over to Emma and Kelly from With Not For. They are the experts in this. The disability community is more passionate individuals, so we are very, very excited to have them. And I'm happy to hand over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for joining us today. First off, my name is Emma Gardner. I am co-founder and COO of With Not For. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white woman in my mid-40s wearing a white shirt and glasses. To give you a bit of context on my personal lived experience of disability, I have been diagnosed or was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in my early 30s. In reality, something that I've lived with since being a child. And I continue to manage that into my adult life through medication. I'm also neurodivergent and a parent and carer, as my 12-year-old daughter is also disabled. And I'll let Kelly, my co-founder, introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Gordon. I am co-founder and CEO of With Not For. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s, wearing some funky glasses, with kind of a bob style black haircuts. And I am a full-time wheelchair user, so that's my disability and my exposure to disability. I've been disabled and had my condition for my whole life, which is a progressive condition. So I've learned a lot about myself and navigating what it means to have a progressive disability.
So before we get into today's session, we'll just tell you a little bit about With Not For. So we are a disability inclusion consultancy that specialises in training, representation and production. And we set up With Not For on a mission to bring more disabled talent into workplaces. As Adam mentioned, we're disability founded and led business. And our goal is to support clients and organisations to include and represent disability working with disabled people and not for them. So yeah, making sure that disabled voices are able to contribute to processes and strategies around inclusion. So, bit of housekeeping before we start. This is a welcoming and open space. I'll be lead facilitating today. Kelly will be managing the chat. So please do contribute and engage if you feel comfortable. This webinar is being recorded and it will be housed on the Inclusion in Finance member portal along with a condensed version of the presentation by way of a toolkit. There are captions available if you need them, and they can be accessed on the bottom of your Zoom screen. There should be a tab that says More with 3 dots. If you click that, you'll be able to enable the captions. Sometimes it might be hidden depending on what size your screen is. But yeah, please do pop a note in the chat if you're struggling with that. We can provide transcripts available on request. If you can email Adriana at inclusioninfinance.com. And also if the chat function isn't working for you, I know sometimes that there are restrictions based on company policy. Again, Adriana at inclusioninfinance.com, and Adriana will pull the questions into the chat for us. We might do a quick break around 2:30 as it's a big session today, 2 hours. We've got a lot to get through, but that should just be around 5 minutes. And then there will be a short survey at the end before we talk to you about what else is coming up. So it'd be great if you could stay to fill that in, please. So as I said, we've got a pretty packed agenda today. We're going to talk about access and inclusion and making workplaces kind of more accessible. But in order for us to do that, we need to think about mindset and perception of disability. We need to think about the diversity of disability, identity, the social model. We're going to cover off some language and interaction guidance to help workplace relations feel a bit more natural and respectful. We'll also touch on the commercial and legal case for disability inclusion. And then we've got some perspectives that we're including from an anonymous survey that we carried out with individuals from different member companies within IIF, which will contribute to modules 2 and 3. And then we're going to talk about a bit of myth busting in terms of accessibility and providing reasonable adjustments, as well as how access and inclusion can strengthen recruitment, retention, and innovation. So in order to talk about access, we also have to think about disability and mindset and perception around disability. The breadth of disability is extraordinarily broad. And when we do our work at With Not For, we talk about disability inclusion encompassing people with visible and physical disabilities, people with less apparent conditions and disabilities, including neurodivergence, chronic illness, cognitive and mental health conditions, and people who are deaf, blind, or have speech impairments, and even temporary disabilities and conditions. We'll come on more to talk about self-identification and how various people identify and sub-communities. But for now, just to give you an idea of the breadth and diversity of the subject matter, particularly in the context of access and inclusion in the workplace, this is what we're kind of looking at today. We can also refer to the legal definition and criteria of disability as provided by gov.uk, which states that you're disabled under the Equality Act 2010 if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. So 2 words are doing quite a lot of heavy lifting within the definition itself. First being substantial, which is more than a minor or trivial kind of condition or symptom that affects things like maybe taking much longer to complete tasks, things like getting dressed. This is quite a broad sort of criteria, which I think there in itself does provide a lot of, or cause a lot of confusion within workplaces as to what does and doesn't apply as a disability. But also the word long term, which means that it has to have an impact for 12 months or more. So an example of that could be a breathing condition that develops as a result of lung infection. I know depression can fall into this as well. So we'll talk more about kind of different conditions and disabilities that fall under the umbrella term. But this is the government guidance that we're given, and there's not much to go on. And if we even look at the language in some of the definition, if we think about language such as negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities, this is also kind of positioning disability somewhat in a negative light, which is not an ideal place to start. If we look at statistics more generally, within the UK, we know that 25% of people are disabled, approximately 1 in 4, and that disabled people are twice as likely to be unemployed. There's been a change and rise in disability prevalence as kind of visualized by the graph on the right. This shows prevalence has risen in the UK between 2012 and 2024. And this has been through 6 kind of key factors. This is again sourced from Gov Parliament UK. Mental health is a big factor in the increase. It's listed as main disability and it's doubled since 2013/14, driven largely by depression and anxiety. Post-pandemic, long COVID and long-term disability and chronic conditions have had an impact in the figures. Also, NHS waiting lists and delays in diagnosis and treatment has led to conditions becoming more chronic and disabling. I think awareness and reduced stigma is a positive reason that things have risen. More people are identifying and disclosing, particularly around mental health conditions, which hasn't been something that's been seen in the past. Post-pandemic mental health deterioration has also been something that's been flagged. So severe depressive symptoms rose from 10%, which was pre-pandemic, to 16% in adults afterwards. And then lastly, we think of the demographic change, so the aging population and disability prevalence rising more sharply with age. So lots of reasons to why the charts are climbing and more people are declaring and identifying as disabled. I'm now going to play you a clip of Adam, the lovely Adam, speaking at the IIF conference, annual event last year. And this is just going to contextualize some of the stats within the industry. Here we go.
But why should we be talking about disability inclusion? Is it even an investment industry problem? Just this week, the Keep Britain Working review has been published by Sir Charlie Mayfield. He states the case for change is overwhelming. He notes the UK lacks systemic levers to support disabled people in work, leaving them disproportionately excluded and talent wasted. He says employers need to do more. And how about our industry? 24% of the population of working age report a disability. That's 10 million people in the UK. And our industry is 4%. I call that a disability unemployment gap of 20%. If you take that outside of this room, the Investment Association says our industry is 46,000 people. That's 9,000 people we're excluding from our industry. Now, if you believe that's a disclosure problem, that's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable to bring themselves to work. Or if it's an accessibility and inclusion problem, that's a substantial barrier to entry to our industry. And before...
So, as Adam says, it's a lot of people that we're talking about currently being excluded or that don't feel safe to disclose or capable of disclosing during the workplace. So as we go through this, we're just going to start off with a quick reflection exercise. I would love to ask you to take a few moments, just yourself. You don't have to share this with anyone. I'm just going to give you a minute or so to take a few moments to think about the word disabled and what it means to you. We do this in each one of our sessions, and it really helps us to connect with kind of our own perceptions as individuals and what might be happening around that word. So if you can take a moment to note that down, it can be anything that comes to mind. And really, as I say, it's an exercise on perception. I'm just going to give you a minute to have a quick think about that. Okay, so you don't have to share, but if anyone would like to share, is brave enough to share, like I said, this is a very welcoming and open space. Please let us know what came up for you in the chat. Was it a word, maybe a feeling, maybe a person you know? What did they look like? What were they doing? Was it something completely different? If there's anything happening in the chat, Kelly, please do let me know. We can read a few out.
There's quite a few actually. It's going ding ding ding. Let me just check. So, first comment was even more determined to succeed in all aspects of life since I was diagnosed. Somebody's put condition, stigma, diagnosis, a different journey, limited ability, disenfranchisement,
Wow, yeah,
differently abled,
yeah.
inspiring, misunderstood, challenges.
Wow, okay.
Uh,
And a
th- Sorry, do you want a few more or?
few more, yeah, that would be
Uh,
great.
Thinking about young people I've just worked with and how powerful the right support can be. Creatively different Paralympics, somebody has said, and wanting to make a change. Um,
Brilliant.
and then just the last comment is unable to perform daily activities as a normal person.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for engaging. That's much appreciated. I think what it shows as well is that the image, our mental image of disability, is often skewed or influenced by what we're taking in, what we're seeing in culture, media, education, personal experience. There are many factors that contribute to that perception. It's great to hear a varied perception as well in the chat. So, when we talk about mindset of disability, based on the historical view of disability and disabled people in society, it's likely that we all may hold unconscious bias and could still be perpetuating stereotypes and harmful narratives and behaviours. I would say this goes for myself, Kelly, anyone. These things don't just go away, particularly as a lot of portrayal and narratives around disability that could be through, consuming media, learned language, phrases or habitual actions we've grown up with from school age through to adult life. They all affect the way that we talk about, think about, and react to disability in our everyday lives. A topical example of this might be the power of the media and social narrative. So if we think about the political narrative around the cuts to PIP benefits, so personal independent payment for disabled people, the government were talking about those through the lens of cutting them through the lens of suspicion, which then feeds into the sort of scrounger, benefit, fraud, cheat narrative, and that's then perpetuated in the media. That is something that one is really damaging, but also it takes away from the point that it's actually false in its makeup of an argument or of a policy based on the fact that PIP is an in-work benefit, and lots of disabled people utilize that benefit to cover additional costs of living in terms of travel, getting to work, additional support they might need at work through PAs or additional equipment. So by removing that, we're removing a lot of disabled people's ability to work. So I think general public quite often feels that that is just a benefit that disabled people will take advantage of so that they don't have to work. But the reality is quite the opposite, but that's not really the message that lands more broadly. So one of many examples of how perception and the way that the disability narrative is perpetuated in society has a large and great impact on disabled people. I'm going to play a very quick ad now. This is from CoreDown, which is a charity that supports people with Down syndrome and their families. And it is a masterclass in challenging our own assumptions around, in this particular case, a woman with Down syndrome. But this resonated a lot with wider disabled community. And there are lessons that we can take from this when we're thinking about challenging assumptions in the workplace as well.
Hey bartender, you assume that I cannot drink a margarita, so you don't serve me a margarita? I don't drink a margarita. Your assumption becomes reality. And parents, you assume that I cannot live on my own, so you don't encourage me to live on my own. So I don't live on my own. Coach, you assume that I cannot hit harder, so you don't train me to hit harder, so I don't hit harder. And teacher, you assume that I cannot learn Shakespeare, so you don't teach me Shakespeare. Old MacDonald had a farm, so I don't learn Shakespeare. E-I-E-I-O. But hey, if all your assumptions become reality, then assume that I can drink a margarita. And you serve me a margarita, so I drink margarita. Assume that I can live on my own, so I live on my own. Assume that I can hit harder, so I hit harder. Assume that I can learn Shakespeare. So, what will the mortal be? I learned fucking Shakespeare. You assume I can swear, right? Assume that I can do that job. That I can go to parties. That I can have sex. That I can be on stage. Assume that I can. So maybe I will.
So quite a powerful piece and quite a contemporary and provocative piece from a charity, which, you know, charities historically get a bad rap when representing disability, as it can err on the side of pity or saviorism. But this was a real masterclass. And I have to say, as a parent carer, I learned a lot from this. I think there are a lot of lessons that we can apply to broad assumptions around disability more generally in other places in our work and lives. So, in order to understand how we might include disabled people more authentically and provide access, we have to address and understand ways in which ableism can show up. Ableism is the discrimination of disabled people and the kind of favour and priority of maybe more typical structures, processes, people, bodies, abilities that ableism is something that disabled people have to deal with every day, and they can show up in three different ways. The three ways we're going to talk about today particularly are structurally. So what is structural ableism, what is interpersonal ableism, and what is internalized ableism. So first of all, let's take structural ableism. So institutional environments, spaces and places not built to include disabled people. This is where a lot of people's assumptions around accessibility, for example, might start and end. So they might think that accessibility is only having a lift or only having a ramp for wheelchair users specifically. Because when we think about the definition of disability, unless there is personal experience and more education there, most people will relate that to the international sign of disabled people or disability, which is a wheelchair user. But this also is much more broader than that. It includes systems, processes, and attitudes fueled by social perceptions. It results in a lack of accessibility and feelings of segregation and isolation, potentially also underperformance. And it removes the ability to participate or include it, or to be included. So if we think about this in a workplace context, this could also be anything relating to certain amounts of flexibility in processes. This could be a really good example is, and it's a small but important example, sometimes things like camera on policies for all meetings, for all things that might affect somebody that not necessarily isn't a wheelchair user, that is dealing with different, maybe energy related disabilities or neurodivergence, or things around even how we put job descriptions out into the industry, or recruitment practices. There can be structural ableism embedded in all of these without the right knowledge to know how we are asking potential disabled employees to engage with us. There'll be barriers there already. Something we will talk much more about in module 2. Interpersonal ableism occurs between people, and it's rooted a lot in language. And it's important to say here that when we talk about bias and we talk about language and we use terms like ableism, which can be quite confronting. We're not here to say that anybody is a bad person. I suppose what we're here to demonstrate is that these things have become very colloquial, potentially habitual, unconscious, whatever they are, but they have such a real impact on disabled people, and therefore the view of disability in certain environments, and in a workplace environment it's really important. So quite often interpersonal ableism might occur between a non-disabled person and a disabled person. It's usually born out of trying to make conversation, trying to be good intended, trying to say something that, I don't know, creates a bit of humor or a moment of conversation or connection. However, I think what we have to think about here is intent over impact. So saying something like, "You don't look disabled," to somebody, again, errs on the negative. You're trying to distance the person from being disabled, or you're trying to make them feel better that they don't look so disabled. Asking what's wrong with a person or what's wrong with you is another sort of language sort of oversight. This has happened to me. I know it happens to Kelly a lot. And it's something that, again, people aren't necessarily wanting to offend, but it's a very hard question to receive, because not necessarily anything wrong with anyone. It's painting the disability or the whatever difference that person can see as a negative. And also it might be quite an invasive question. So what's wrong with you is one that happens quite often. We then look at language that trivializes or minimizes certain conditions. So things like using words like mental or insane, or trivializing OCD. I'm so OCD about my desk. These sorts of things really do impact people with those conditions, and as I say, it can really trivialize them and take them into an othered space, or paint those things out to be attached to negativity. One of the words that I have trained myself to use instead of mental or insane is wild. And we do get a lot of conversations here around, can't say anything anymore, I would never mean that. But again, we always come back to the impact that words can have, and also how they shape culture. And culture, particularly at the moment through smartphones and, you know, a lot of younger generations getting access to the internet and everything much earlier. Things like language like dumb, lame, things that, you know, for us, we would border on slurs, and in context, certain contexts, they are. They're becoming very prevalent again in young people's dialogues. So it's something that we have to think about. Language has a huge impact. Another big one that we are seeing a lot at the moment, particularly in the last few years, with the rise of kind of awareness and conversations around neurodivergence, is that people will, you know, talk about a diagnosis or share a diagnosis, or talk about somebody with autism or ADHD, and the reaction to that could be, everyone's a bit that, everyone's on the spectrum, everybody's got a bit of autism. And again, those things are really, for one, making the person who's having that conversation sort of feel some type of way about that, but also it's trivializing and minimizing their own experience. We are all neurodiverse, but there are neurodivergent people and neurotypical people. So it is different, and education is lacking in those things. And I know Kelly, as a wheelchair user, a power chair user, things like trivializing somebody's mobility aids, trying to make a joke out of them, ultimately othering them in a conversation, when that conversation, rather than, oh, don't go too fast, you'll get a speeding ticket, could just be, how's your day? You know, hope your day goes well. It doesn't have to always be about somebody's disability. So these are just some examples. I'm sure we know there are many, many more, but it's worth thinking about in terms of day-to-day interactions. Does disability need to be the thing that we talk about if it's not relevant? But also, are we infringing on a bit of interpersonal ableism in doing so? And then internalized ableism is the last one we'll talk about. And this is When a disabled person absorbs and believes the negative messages around disability that are within society and all around us, that being disabled makes them less, potentially a burden, less capable, and it applies those beliefs to themselves. So it can show up as a reluctance to identify as disabled, downplaying symptoms, working through symptoms, masking, to the extent of burnout quite a lot of the time, or really distancing from the label or perception of disability, to appear quote unquote normal. And that, brings about feelings of shame. People might not disclose or request adjustments or support in a workplace scenario. It's society's prejudice turned inwards. And that is, something very real, something that lots of people, whoever they are, disabled people, struggle with quite a lot. I know Kelly and I both have, and continue to. It's not something that is necessarily solved. I think it's always going to be there. There's not going to be a magic wand, but it is really hard to push through internalized ableism, and it's something that doesn't get quite as much discussion when talking about disability inclusion, because it does have an impact on how we show up as ourselves. So before we go into the next section, I just want to break to see if there's any questions or input on the mindset and perception.
There was one that says equally words are shaped by culture. So just changing the words without challenging the underlying stigma leads to terms like special becoming derogatory.
Yes, absolutely. The two are so tightly interlinked. And I think that's the part, is that there is such a lack of understanding, I think, sometimes about what the impact of those words have, or where those words have come from originally as well, what words have been reclaimed, what language is for who. There's certainly a lot of language within the disability community that's not for, that's been reclaimed, that's not for non-disabled people. But yeah, it is a thorny but also complex issue. And I think, again, I would go to the accessibility of, I don't know, the cutting edge finger on the pulse culture that the world has through smartphones as well. That exacerbates the issue from our perspective.
Absolutely. There's nothing else in the chat at the moment, but I'll keep an eye as we progress.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the scale and diversity of disability and identity in this section. So the diversity of disability, as we've said, it's broad, it's intersectional. Anybody can become disabled at any point. And for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to break this down into 4 different categories, if you like. So we're going to use the chat function again. I'm going to ask Kelly to come back. And what we would like you to do is just sort of taking a temperature check on what sorts of conditions we might think apply to visible. Just put any ideas that come up. If you have any examples of a visible disability, we'll start there and then we'll go through. So it's important to say that not every disability will fit into one category. So, for example, somebody who is, let's say, deaf, that could fit into visible or less apparent, depending on how that person presents, whether they have interpreters, all of that sort of thing. So can anybody think of any examples of a visible disability?
Limb differences,
Excellent.
amputations,
Excellent. Yeah.
nothing else at the moment.
Okay, brilliant. What about if we talk about
Sorry, there's like loads come through all at once. Down syndrome,
Yes.
mobility, someone else saying Down syndrome, wheelchair user,
Yep.
visually impaired.
Perfect. What about less apparent? So something that might not be obvious or visible.
Someone's put stroke, but I think that might have been for the previous. Hearing aid, if visible. And then for less apparent, we've got IBD,
Yep.
dyslexia, MS, autoimmune diseases, death with a CAPD, chronic illnesses like MS and Crohn's, fibromyalgia. Someone put my hearing aids aren't visible with a smiley face.
Very good.
Crohn's and ME.
Brilliant. Any neurodivergent conditions now?
Depression, dyslexia, autism, dyspraxia, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's, ADHD.
Great. And
Yeah.
then lastly, temporary, something that could be temporary, a condition that we might have temporarily that might be disabling.
Someone popped anxiety as well into neurodivergence. And then for temporary, we've got menopause, broken leg, tinnitus, menopause again, cancer, mental health.
Mhm.
And that's it for now. Oh, perimenopause.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. So that has covered quite a lot. This is not an exhaustive list, but as the chat has shown, there are a huge amount of different conditions and disabilities that could fall in multiple or any of these categories. So I don't think we missed anything out on visible, apart from people of small stature. Mental health actually sits within less apparent rather than a neurodivergent condition. But other things there, obsessive compulsive disorder, I think we've mentioned everything else, diabetes, long COVID, neurodivergence, everything I think was listed out there in terms of, autism, dyscalculia, Tourette's syndrome. And then, yes, excuse me, cancer was one I know was mentioned, broken leg bones or post-surgery recovery, concussion or TBI, which stands for traumatic brain injury, sometimes long-term, severe back pain or injury, and menopause has definitely been put in the chat a few times. So yes.
Someone said, interesting that OCD does not sit within neurodivergence.
Yeah, I think it depends on which different thing, but I will, yes, thank you for that. I'll have a look into that.
I think there are a few that go across multiple as well, aren't there?
Yes, exactly. Okay, so then if we start to look at disability pride under the umbrella of identity. So on the right-hand side is a picture of the disability pride flag, and it contains different diagonal stripes that each represent a different sub-community within the wider disabled community. So the red is representative of physical disabilities. The goldy yellow is neurodivergence. The white is invisible and undiagnosed disabilities. Blue is for mental health conditions, and green is for sensory conditions. The black represents, I suppose, loss and mourning of disabled people. And essentially, this is kind of created for Disability Pride Month, which happens in July each year. It's separate to Pride. It's about identity and pride of being disabled as a wide and intersectional and diverse community. And that leads us on to disabled with a capital D. So for many, the use of the capital D in disabled reflects a shared identity and an ongoing commitment to advocate for rights and equality. Embracing CAPD disabled can be seen as demonstrating alignment with the social model, which we'll come on to talk about, and identity first language, signifying pride in being part of this community and actively engaging with disabled culture. So something that not everybody aligns with, and self-identification and preference is really valid and important, but something to note within, I suppose, UK and certainly within With Not For's work and thinking, disability pride is something that is really important to us and something that we utilize in terms of CAPD disabled and reference. So we're going to play a short film on the social model of disability. It just takes a couple of seconds So don't worry, the sound will work. It'll kick in after the logo.
According to the medical model of disability, the word disabled means less able. Less able to achieve your potential, less able to have meaningful relationships, less able to play an active part in the world around you, and that this is just your bad luck. This outdated view of the world puts the responsibility of overcoming disabling barriers on the person with an impairment. But this idea is changing. The more modern social model of disability says that a person doesn't have a disability, but that they are disabled. They are disabled by society. It is the attitudes and physical barriers imposed on them by society that prevents them from achieving their potential. The social model was developed by disabled people and their allies to help them take action against discrimination and to empower people to find solutions, remove barriers, and campaign together for equality and human rights. They showed how people with lots of different impairments face many of the same problems. These disabling barriers include prejudiced opinions and attitudes, restricted access, and people being systematically excluded. The social model looks for the ways that society can be planned and organised in order to provide accessibility, independence, and opportunity in a way that enables people rather than disables them. What we learn from the social model of disability is that disability is a social construct created by social barriers, barriers which can be eliminated. We learn that it is the responsibility of government, public spaces, businesses, and individual people to make the changes, to increase the access, and build a more equal society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Okay. So a chart just to demonstrate some of the differences around the social model and the medical model. Both still exist, definitely, within the UK. I think the social model is something that's more widely adopted and kind of works within the disability justice and the disability pride space for sure. But essentially the concept of the social model is that disability arises from societal barriers and attitudes, as opposed to medical model, which is that it's a problem to be fixed or with the individual. So as the film says, about removing barriers rather than fixing or curing. The responsibilities on society rather than the individual. To adapt to an existing environment that may not work for them. And the solution is in social change, driving accessibility and inclusion to empower individuals, as opposed to medical intervention or rehabilitation or normalizing or fixing disabled people or their bodies. And then language, often, but not always, is identity and person first language, so either or. Which is more of a preference of ownership and disability being part of somebody's identity, whether that's identity first or person first, which we'll talk about. But as opposed to language being more negative and leading with things like somebody suffering from a condition or confined to a wheelchair or wheelchair bound. So there's a real difference in language, which we'll come on to. And then the outcome really is an emphasis on independence, rights and equal opportunities, and I would say autonomy within that as well. Whereas the medical model really emphasizes dependence and limitations and people speaking for or making decisions for disabled people without their kind of input or consent, really. So the two different types of identifying language then. So person first language is when an individual puts some distance between themselves as a person and their disability identity. Examples of person first language could be a person with a disability, a person with autism, a person using a wheelchair. They favour this approach. This approach often believe that putting the word person before the disability helps to communicate that the disability is secondary to the main identity. Whereas identity first language proudly places disability at the centre and is an integral part of someone's identity and how they describe themselves. So rather than saying a person with a disability, they would refer to themselves as a disabled person or an autistic person or a wheelchair user. Kind of designed to destigmatize disability and celebrate the role it plays in shaping that the disability is something that is a core part of our identity, that shaped who we are and how we interact with the world. There is no wrong or right. This is totally personal preference. We know and work with lots of different people who identify in different ways. And I think it's really important to say that both are valid. And how people feel about even the term disabled is valid. That's an individual person's perspective and experience. But it's good to give information on the two types of ways in which people would typically identify. And as I said, it's self-identification is really important. It's preference, personal choice, and when somebody is misrepresented or uninformed language or vocabulary is used, it can really cause upset and take a toll on someone's self-esteem and sense of belonging. So identity and language around that is really important. We also have to be mindful of cultural differences. So globally, person first language is still the default choice. Many countries around the world, you'll see terms like person with disability rather than disabled person being used in everyday language, particularly in US organizations. They actually stipulate that the communication has to be person first language. In the UK, things are slightly more different. It's still definitely down to individual preference. However, identity first language is largely considered best practice. It's adopted by GovUK, Scope, Charity, and it probably reflects more the fact that the social model is more widely understood and adopted in the UK, and it's seen as more of a progressive approach in influencing the language that we use. But it's really key to double check regionally and culturally kind of what language is being used, wherever you are in the world. So navigating disability, it's absolutely not a monolith. We know this, but we also know through touching on mindset that perspectives and experiences of disabled people can vary based on a multitude of factors. So I'd love to ask, what factors do you think influence the way people feel about their disability, other than things like media and society? What other things, more granular things, might affect how people feel about their disability?
Parenting.
Absolutely.
Worry about saying the wrong thing. Own self-confidence and belief.
Yeah.
Nothing else at the moment. Cultural acceptance.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
How much it interferes with them from achieving goals.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Nothing else at the moment.
So we've touched on influenced by maybe parent, carer, how it's been portrayed in childhood. School systems, I think, have a really big part in that, in terms of how disability is viewed in schools, and maybe certain language around that. School systems play a part in disabled people moving through that into adult life. Internalized ableism we have covered. There is a sort of sense of a hierarchy of disability as well within the community. And I know, Kelly, you've talked about this a lot in terms of, are certain people or conditions, are they disabled enough? Do they have the kind of lion's share of the term disability, or are some people, I don't know, kind of putting themselves above, more disabled than others, with more visible disabilities than others. And it's a very real kind of tension that exists within the community, isn't it?
I think particularly for wheelchair users as well, there's power chair users, manual wheelchair users, then people that might use assistive tech in their wheelchairs, and there's those levels of kind of disability, and there can be, the sort of you're more disabled than me, or obviously some manual chair users can transfer, and then that changes some elements of their experience as to what they're able to do and not do. So yeah, I think it comes from both sides. It's some people have that worry of I'm not disabled enough, and then other people kind of have that hierarchy of, I have more needs, or it's a very difficult one to navigate, especially I would say within the sort of physical disability side of things.
Yes, and I think something around that would definitely have stopped me identifying in the beginning, and still where maybe internalized ableism shows up within myself is the fact that I have the ability to mask, or that not everything is necessarily visible. That definitely plays into a sort of feeling of there being hierarchy as well.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's come through a lot in research, is that we were talking to two people in the research that were in between positions, and they were really sort of worried about disclosure because of how that might affect their likelihood of getting the role as well. So it works that way as well, I would say.
For sure. Cultural aspects, people have covered in the chat as well. Some people are unaware that certain things are disabilities, or certainly fall within that kind of criteria or definition. I think there's still education to be done there. If somebody has a temporary disability, potentially that's not, going to change their view, or make them feel like they're identifying as disabled. Potentially, if something is only on a temporary basis, there's still so much stigma, and I think worry around disclosing, and that's going to have a negative impact on our lives or careers. But yes, I think the top two are something that we've done and talked about and done a lot of research on, is the difference of potentially how somebody feels when they're born with a disability and then acquiring a disability as well. They are two very different journeys, two very different experiences. So again, everybody's feelings and thoughts are valid and completely different and individual around how they might feel about their own disability or disability in general.
There's just a few more comments in the chat actually,
Yeah.
Em, as well. Peer group, which I think is a really great one that I don't
Yeah.
think I've heard many times before. Someone says that you shouldn't be able to do something. Then somebody else said, I've been told more than once that I shouldn't be using a disabled loo, which can make it feel like I have to justify myself. That, yeah, we've come across that time and time again with some of our talent, haven't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then feeling like a fraud if I don't look disabled, which is another one for sure.
Definitely, yeah. That other people's perception of disability as well, and what they might think of you identifying is, that's very real for sure. Okay, so we are doing well for time, I think, which is good. We're going to go into the language and interaction section now, and we are going to first of all, start with terminology. Now, a couple of caveats before we go through this as well. Our guidance here is social model, UK progressive, UK first. And so we are adopting the word disabled in terms of that. But also, I think it's important to say here that what we are sharing today is broadly kind of what we're seeing as best practice and what we've researched, but also that is the least likely to get somebody in hot water. But everything is individual, everything is personal preference. But if we go through, we have this adopt, assess and avoid system, which is depicted in the 3 sections on the right. So we'll talk about the words first, and then I'll go through the kind of recommendations. But in terms of disability terminology, we would absolutely advise that, adopting the term disabled person, or person with a disability, depending on how that person might identify or where you are in the world, that is absolutely fine to say in the context of it being relevant in the conversation. I wouldn't just start a conversation around, this is my disabled friend Kelly, unless that was relevant to the conversation. My disabled colleague Kelly, or disabled Kelly, that's not what we're saying. We're saying you can use the word disabled person, or person with a disability in the context of a conversation where it's relevant. We would always talk about saying disabled or person with a disability over something, for example, like differently abled. And I know that term is something that some people do adopt. So that would be for us in the avoid category, because that's also seen as something that has, again, if we think about the history of language and where that term's come from, it's come from a time where distance was being sort of created between the label of disabled and differently abled. So it was sort of saying, no, you're not disabled because that's a negative, bad thing. You're just differently abled. So it's seen as a euphemism or something that's more palatable, that again portrays disability as shameful or negative. So some people still use it, and that is again preference and personal choice, but in the context of certainly day-to-day and more generic language and terminology, unless you know that is someone's absolute preference, we would put that in the avoid camp. When we're describing somebody without a disability, we would say non-disabled person over able-bodied or quote-unquote normal. Non-disabled is kind of more widely adopted now. Able-bodied is still used, but it's not actually that accurate. And again, it's sort of, for example, you could still have a disability, but not have a physical disability that might, is the correlation between disability and physical capabilities as well. So able-bodied is something that everybody is moving away from. Certainly the kind of normal is something that might be said, not necessarily when describing a non-disabled person, but certainly sometimes in conversations about even just normalizing disability, which we hear a lot, or normalizing a conversation. Sometimes those things can creep out in day-to-day conversation, which again would create a sense of disability being abnormal. And then the word disability, absolutely. And then talking about people having neurodivergence or being neurodivergent. As I said before, we are all neurodiverse, and there's neurotypical people and people that are neurodivergent. And the concept of saying that's absolutely fine. And then less apparent disabilities is something that we adopt and advise over hidden invisible disabilities, or hidden or invisible disabilities, and impairment and condition. Now, those two things are in the assess section because they're not necessarily wrong, absolutely not wrong. But some of our research and a lot of kind of more progressive thinking around less apparent or non-apparent being adopted is because things like hidden might kind of mean that there's kind of shame and something to hide there, or again, in that hierarchy of disabilities, that invisible disability is not being disabled enough, or again, something that is sort of creating a sense of not feeling seen as somebody without seen as disabled without having a physical disability. So again, not wrong, just assess the situation that you're using those in, but really less apparent or non-apparent disabilities does the job and doesn't really offend anyone. Impairment and condition are two words that are quite tricky. So some people hate the word impairment and will avoid that. Impairment and condition can be widely adopted as well. Sometimes they sit more within the medical model of disability. Sometimes you have to say them within, I don't know, the name of a diagnosis. I've said condition many times today, mental health condition. I prefer over mental illness, for example. But again, it's about assessing whether you need to use medical terminology, whether you can just say disabled, whether that conversation really needs to go into that granular detail or not, because everybody's preference will be slightly different. But ultimately, it's really key to listen for and allow for personal preference and understand that self-identification matters, and not everybody wants to identify the same way. Avoid using more palatable terms and euphemisms like differently abled. Again, this is one we've covered. And then referring to a disability is more appropriate and less invasive than using specifics around conditions. So Kelly and I came on the call today and disclosed for context and also to share our experience of disability individually, but that is not something that should be expected of any disabled person or employee. Medical information and private information is not demanded of non-disabled people, so we should respect that with disabled people as well. And then we talked about cultural and geographical differences and neurodiversity. So descriptors. So again, there will be a toolkit that you'll be able to download with other resources and links on sort of more exhaustive language. We can't go through everything today, unfortunately, in this session. But we've just pulled out a few things that might help day to day in application. So if we move on to descriptors, what we're really looking at here is avoiding negative and victimizing terms. We're steering clear of any language that implies suffering or helplessness. We want to use neutral descriptive language, nothing that it sensationalizes or evokes pity, and really thinking about when we mention a person's disability, which is always only when it's relevant and with their consent. And also, is disability relevant to the conversation? So if we were describing somebody that is a wheelchair user, and I'm going to use my wonderful colleague, Kelly, we would adopt that Kelly uses a wheelchair, or Kelly is a wheelchair user, for example. If for whatever reason, we needed to talk about Kelly's specific medical condition in a private conversation, or Kelly was talking about that, then, we could say Kelly is a person with X, or Kelly has X disability or condition. And if I was to start describing Kelly and our working relationship, I would say Kelly is my colleague. I might say Kelly is my disabled colleague if that was relevant. So it might be around talking to Adriana, let's say, at Inclusion in Finance. I might say, well, Kelly is my disabled colleague, or Kelly is my colleague. She has experience of disability, because that's relevant to the training that we are going to be delivering. I wouldn't just say that and introduce Kelly as a disabled colleague. And then things to avoid. So the kind of more negative language around wheelchairs, which we've touched on: confined to a wheelchair, wheelchair bound, suffers from or is afflicted by X condition. And again, I think there's sometimes a lot of subconscious or unconscious language that comes out around despite disability or in spite of disability. So if we were going to go back to the phrase around Kelly being my colleague, I wouldn't say Kelly is my colleague despite her disability. That's just something that sometimes feels obvious, but it isn't, again, because that means that disability is seen as something that needs to be overcome or fixed, whereas actually it's actually accessibility that will affect Kelly and her workplace and how she operates or thrives, or how any of us do. Kelly was just my example. And then if we talk about accessibility, so we all need access to participate and thrive. We're going to talk about a bit about reasonable adjustments in this section, but also more so in module 2, if you join us for that, and kind of the language around that. But if we're looking at language to adopt, so we are, let's say, working in a business and we want to encourage, let's say, disclosure around disability or access requirements, we would simply say something like, do you have any access requirements? Or it might be something you put on a footnote of an email or an event or a recruitment brief. Please let us know if you have any accessibility requirements, and we'll do our best to put those in place for you. You could say reasonable adjustments, and that is still absolutely correct and widely adopted in corporate and creative industries still. But there is some thinking around reasonable adjustment and the language there. If we think about the mental place, maybe that somebody has got to be able to request some access, to then think about, well, is this reasonable? Am I going to be, will people believe me? Am I being too much? It's kind of causing quite a negative, maybe thought spiral around that. Also, it sometimes kind of feels as if then it is a, let's say, manager or a decision around whether a person can then deem whether it's reasonable or not, whereas actually adjustments in the workplace are part of the Equality Act, and there's something that disabled people are entitled to. So I think reasonable there just kind of puts certain people in a negative space. So why don't we just call it what it is? Accessibility requirements. Things like adaptations and accommodations are just other ways of saying accessibility. They're all perfectly fine. Just assessing the situation we're using them in. Complex needs is in there because, again, that is something that somebody might disclose as an individual. That's not something you would necessarily talk about somebody having publicly. It will be often with the disclosure of maybe medical information or what to do potentially in a crisis or an emergency. So complex needs can be discussed at the discretion of the person disclosing, but they should never really be shared, certainly without consent. And then special needs is obviously something that has come through historic school systems. We still have it in SEN now within schools. It is something that we definitely can't get away from in some institutions, but it has been, as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier on, kind of equated to derogatory language and sort of seen as othering, and something that I know a lot of disabled adults and a lot of the research that we do and as individuals, we would never identify as having special needs, particularly not in the workplace. It's unavoidable in school systems. I've tried to get around it without saying it, but quite often that doesn't really get me anywhere. But yeah, SEN is kind of designed to abbreviate and avoid that, but it's not something we say in the workplace. And then lastly, just a note on adopting language around toilets or facilities and parking. We have had personal experience of using disabled toilets that aren't actually accessible. So we've had one where there was a step inside the disabled toilet, which meant that wasn't accessible for wheelchair users or people with different mobility aids, and disabled parking. Quite often people or organisations or businesses will put the disabled symbol on a parking space, but realistically an accessible parking space has to be the larger ones for side access, for rear access. It's not about just plonking a symbol on a let's say standard typical parking space. So it's just worth thinking about when we're talking about disabled facilities, are they actually accessible? And often people will, as somebody shared in the chat, a disabled toilet with the symbol of the wheelchair user on the front will be perceived to be only for people with visible conditions, or what's typically seen as a disability. So accessible facilities is much more inclusive as well. I might just stop here to see whether we've got any questions on, because I saw the chat popping, just on the terminology and language before we take a short break and come back.
No, nothing really about terminology or language, but somebody's put about the accessible facilities, and they've put baby changing tables that get in the way of wheelchairs is a frequent one. I was just about to reply and say absolutely. Yeah, having the baby changing facilities in the accessible toilet, I still find that quite wild sometimes, because I go in there and you don't want to smell nappies and things all the time, and maybe you want a bit of space. But yeah, it's interesting that the changing beds that are actually required, obviously within changing places, bathrooms, are completely different from baby changing facilities. So definitely a different one. And then somebody's put Lime bikes parked in the middle of pavements is an issue as well. Absolutely. Or cars for that matter. Yeah, or bins, things like, obstacles that are provided and could be moved by members of the public, or maybe they couldn't, if they could think about it before they put those things in place. Yeah, definitely agree with that one.
Brilliant. Okay. So we'll keep going. Hopefully everyone's back with us. So just to finish off on the language and interaction section, we know that it's been mentioned in the chat previously and accurately that lots of people still feel uncomfortable talking to disabled people. I think that comes from, like we said, feeling like they might say something wrong, or feeling awkward or not comfortable. And that's something that we're trying to address. It's a real barrier in terms of inclusion, accessibility, and just kind of, creating more of a sense of humanity as well. That's, I think, quite often something that Scopes reported around visible disabilities, but I think as conversations grow, that does apply to less apparent or non-apparent disabilities as well. As we saw from the reflection exercise, if somebody is disabled or has a close relationship with a disabled person, they're less likely, not always, to hold a variety of negative attitudes. It does certainly help. People are more informed. But yes, certainly in workplaces, for example, where maybe disability isn't typical or seen or talked about as often, there is this kind of fear of doing or saying the wrong thing. So a little bit of guidance on this, and we'll talk through the list first. The biggest thing that is a really key and core principle around interacting with disabled people is that there is this kind of fascination, and sometimes it's innocent and not intended to be invasive, but asking invasive questions around medical conditions or the effects of diagnosis, or in which disabled people might live their lives that differ from non-disabled people, can be quite a confronting experience. And also, I think sometimes we don't need to know the detail. If we go back to, describing somebody as disabled, rather than knowing the ins and outs of their condition where it's not relevant. So do we need to talk about disability in the first instance, and do we really need to get into the weeds of it? That is something that is private information and should be disclosed in appropriate settings if if relevant. I think that goes hand in hand with acknowledging that disabled people have a right to dignity and privacy. So a lot of details don't have to be shared, even in a workplace setting. The thing to focus on would be the accessibility, the processes that can be put in place for that person to perform and thrive and be included in a workplace, rather than the ins and outs or the details of specifics of exactly why those things need to happen. Some of those things are useful in education and understanding to put the right processes in place, but there is still a line, and there is a right to dignity and privacy. And disabled people we all talk about more than disability, although the work that we do, maybe we don't, Kelly, but conversations around just general interactions can be about anything. They don't necessarily have to be about somebody's mobility aid or their disability, or how they're feeling, or their energy, or anything that might be kind of linked to that outside of just a day-to-day conversation. Talking to someone individually rather than the person they're with. That could be a partner, that could be a support person. Again, that's sort of having assumptions on autonomy or capability and understanding. Not touching people's wheelchairs or mobility aids or belongings without asking if you're being helpful. That's not something that is an extension of a person, and something very, again, private and individual. And not making a scene if you get something wrong, and we all get stuff wrong. We all put our foot in our mouths sometimes, or we assume something that we didn't need to assume. But really just being aware of your own fragility or the reaction that then would come from that. And just really kind of taking a moment to listen to the person and be accountable and open to feedback. The most important thing is to talk to and interact with disabled people as you would do anyone else. Everyone is person, everyone is individual, and everyone is human. So if we were going to think about, some of the questions that we get asked quite a lot, and as basic as they sound, these are often, things that people worry about, particularly if there aren't many people in the workplace. How do I approach a disabled person? And if I was going to use Kelly as my example again. Hi, Kelly, how are you? Again, I'm not using anything that isn't relevant in that conversation. I don't need to make it about Kelly, the fact that she's a wheelchair user. I'm just interacting. I'm taking all of the stress and worry out of it and going from there. And then maybe I want to ask Kelly about her access requirements. I would simply ask her to let me know about her access requirements, or if there's anything I can do to improve accessibility for Kelly at this event in this workplace. Do let me know. I'm not asking any invasive questions. I'm just simply asking the information that I need to know. And just by hearing that as a disabled person, that goes a long way, because then we know that you're open to making the workplace more accessible and inclusive. What to do if you get something wrong? First of all, our advice here usually would be to apologise, because that would be what we would normally do with any other situation. And just to reiterate that we didn't mean to offend, or, that was my ignorance, whatever way in which to demonstrate that you have listened and you will, take that on board moving forwards. Another thing that people rarely do, we've had examples of this even this week in our own other work with different clients, is when somebody raises a concern or they have given a piece of feedback, is to actually say thank you for that, because I didn't know that. Actually that diffuses such a lot of tension and worry, both from and potentially even frustration and anger, both from the person who's raised that, but also, things can get tense, things can get uncomfortable. So apologizing or saying thank you without being patronizing genuinely will take a lot of frustration and tension out of an interaction. because it does take a lot to speak up. It does take a lot to say, actually, I didn't appreciate the language that you used, or actually, I'd rather not answer that question. Here's something that I can tell you. Those sorts of interactions can take a lot of energy. They can be quite emotional for various different reasons for individuals. So trying to take the stress out of it, trying to not make too much of a big deal, and really just kind of treat and interact with disabled people as you would do anyone else. So the commercial and legal case. We know from Adam's presentation and also from wider statistics that the UK spending power of disabled people and their families is 274 billion. It's 13 trillion approximately globally. Companies with demonstrate disability inclusion are 2 times more, demonstrate 2 times more economic profit. And also that the talent pool is substantial and diverse, which we will come on to talk about. So the spending power, also known as the purple pound, is really quite significant, and not really being kind of embraced or utilized, or kind of focused on as much as it could be. Absolutely. If we zoom out slightly and think about why the case is stronger in the finance sector more broadly, we know that this is a largely underserved market, and that disabled people often face barriers, whether that's through accessing things like banking apps, insurance, getting access to credit, just even processes to get financial advice, all of these things. But ultimately, like, accessible products and services unlock new customer segments and build higher retention rates and trust. So it's definitely worth thinking about and employing strategies to do so. Accessible design improves customer experience. We know inclusive design leads to clearer communication, better understanding, drives innovation, and all of those things can be beneficial for everybody, improving usability for customers, not just disabled people. And really, financial exclusion is a regulatory risk, and firms can be found in breach of consumer protection rules and equity law and the European Accessibility Act. So higher complaint volumes and compensation being sought is the result of exclusion in those cases. So the legal case then really under anti-discrimination laws and the Equality Act we talked about is something that is very real, and compliance is necessary. It is a duty for workplaces to make reasonable adjustments or provide accessibility. The UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities has accessibility requirements that they demonstrate and require as part of that. And then it also affects things like ESG ratings and businesses' reputation really as well, and then sort of broader environmental and social kind of initiatives and governance. Ultimately, it's litigation and enforcement risk, and then therefore reputational damage is something that is a very real symptom or effect of all of the above. Not to mention that we now know that the disability pay gap reporting is something that's coming into play. So this is the disability and ethnicity pay gap reporting, the purpose of the presentation. We know that in March last year, the government launched a 12-week public consultation seeking views on how to implement mandatory ethnicity and disability pay gap reporting for employers in the UK, large employers. They had various roundtable discussions across different regions and sectors, and almost 860 people and organisations responded. The response was published in March earlier this year and showed an overwhelming employer and public support, with 80% of respondents agreeing that large employers should report their ethnicity and disability pay gaps to increase transparency and tackle workplace barriers. So it's looking likely that from April next year, 2027, large employers will be legally required to report their disability pay gap. We know that there's a confirmed government commitment and draft legislation currently in place. So the direction of travel really is clear, and the window is now, really from now, to get ahead in terms of compliance and compiling data and thinking about strategies to be able to start reporting next year. So this means that the conversation and the reality is really shifting from it's the right thing to do to it becoming a legal obligation that has to be taken seriously. We know that it's likely at this point, we're not confirmed, that it will follow the framework of how the gender pay gap reporting is currently done, which essentially means that employers with 250 employees plus must report annually. There's different mandatory figures in terms of mean and median hourly pay, the pay gap, bonus proportions, and pay quartiles. Has to be a snapshot of data reported within the following year, published on government's online portal or employers' own websites. It's enforced by Equality and Human Rights Commission, and action plans become mandatory alongside data from next year, which means they'll likely be in place for disability and ethnicity pay gap reporting. So we can see that the percentage of the pay gap in the last 8 years has gone from 9.1% in 2017 to 6.9% in 2025, so approximately 2.2 percentage point improvement. But reporting alone doesn't close the gap. And I think also we can tell that it's taking quite some time to reduce that gap significantly. So it's really important to consider messaging and approach sooner rather than later, particularly when it comes to disability, because the data has to be self-reported, voluntary. And if we're suddenly going to be talking in our organisations about disclosure and wanting people to share information, there has to also be a process of trust building and accessibility and inclusive practices that go alongside that. The other thing with disability reporting as well is that if people are disclosing, how long are they staying in the company? Is there something to look at there for future reporting that might, provide variance in that figure each time it's reported, as to whether the turnover of the disclosed disabled employees and what that impact might have. So really it's in the best interest of organisations, not just the disabled employees within them, to start looking at the practices and tactics that can be started and then progressed from this point on to make sure that they're set up to mandatory report the various information that's needed in April 2027. We've also got the European Accessibility Act in play, which came into force in June last year. So we know this applies to all banks, payment providers, investment firms, e-money providers, consumer-facing products in the EU, but also including UK firms that serve EU customers. So this may apply to organisations. It's a consumer duty, and the Equality Act 2010 create parallel obligations for UK-only operations, particularly around vulnerable customers and fair treatment. UK only, we have things like the Web Accessibility Content Guidelines, WCAG. They are not as enforceable, or compliance is suggested, let's say, around those things. But in terms of the EAA, there is a penalty, financial penalty for non-compliance. So it's really not optional. And and its legal, regulatory, and reputational obligations. So that affects everything from websites and mobile apps being accessible, financial documents, physical infrastructure, customer communications, accessibility statements being public, and explain like how accessibility is being met or what steps will be taken to improve accessibility. So these are all really legal serious considerations for businesses when it comes to providing accessibility to employees, but also customers. So we have 2 modules coming up, which I'll talk a bit more around at the end. But we have created a survey and put that out to members a couple of months ago now in the run up to this training. That was an anonymous survey which talked to people that are identified as disabled or neurodivergent or with less apparent conditions, to share perspectives on disclosure, accessibility, and various other things. One of the insights that we have pulled out from the survey around disclosure, we asked the question, how supported, if relevant, did that person filling it in feel through diagnosis or disclosure of disability? So we can see that 23% feel very supported, 45% somewhat supported, 14% would have liked more support, and 18% not supported at all. So 32% of that set were unsupported or would have liked more support during disclosure. So really, we can kind of see that there is a desire for this process to improve, I think, for employers and employees as well. And this is what we're really trying to gather data on and to set up for modules 2 and 3, so we can drill down into how to provide understanding, knowledge, and best practice in improving that process for managers or employers, as well as the people that feel maybe vulnerable or unsafe or worried about disclosing. And again, this is really crucial in the lead up to the disability pay gap reporting that will come into play next year. So access and inclusion, we've talked about business case, we've talked about how inclusion supports disabled people in the workplace, but we also can talk about how it strengthens retention, recruitment, and innovation within a workplace. It's really typical, I think, of disabled people to have to problem solve in daily lives, because the world is not necessarily built or typically designed for us. So that means disabled people bring a lot of diversity of thought, perspective, and adaptability. And also, personally, I don't really like the word resilience. That's just a personal perspective. But I do think that as a group, we are very resilient. We shouldn't have to be so much, but problem solving, resilience, and creativity, genuinely valuable for a lot of different businesses. And those things can improve a workplace and a workforce. Innovation in terms of accessible, inclusive design produces better products, services, and processes for everyone. If we think about even something like captions on video content, ever since they have come out, let's say, I use them on everything. Literally, when I watch TV, I'm not deaf or hard of hearing, but I use them for concentration. They help me focus. I now do not watch anything without captions. And that is something that benefits me, that wasn't necessarily made just for me. If we think about electric toothbrushes, they were invented originally for disabled people. There are lots of different products that are out there. Features on our iPhones, features on our smartphones. Innovation is often adopted more widely because it benefits more than disabled people. It benefits everybody. And then there's a really important point around retention, which I touched on earlier, but it's to say that when a workplace or an environment feels safe and supportive for disabled people, even if a brand or a product feels supportive and accessible, we're significantly more likely to stay. Retention and loyalty are increased and become something that we advocate for because it's not typical, sadly. So there is a real benefit because turnover is expensive, so therefore inclusion is an investment in retention. Trust is a huge thing to consider. Trust is what will improve disclosure, is what will improve disabled people's success, performance, ability to thrive in any environment, particularly organisational in the workplace. And that's internally and externally. So employees will see organisations that take disability seriously, trust more. When the processes and the actions are there alongside the words, the trust is built. And customers who can access services trust you more, will advocate more, will come back again and again because that process is accessible and inclusive. And last but not least, reputation. So increasingly disabled people and their networks, which we know is a significant proportion of the population, are paying attention. Not much gets past the community in terms of performative action. And so we really do pay attention to organisations that are truly putting in the work. And that goes for wider brands and initiatives, whatever. Organisations that are walking the walk as well as talking the talk goes a long way. And, reputation is built slowly but can be lost very quickly, particularly in the age of cancel culture or call out culture. It is a genuine risk. But if you get it right, then it will only do good things. So lastly, before the last couple of slides and we wrap up here, reasonable adjustments, accessibility in the workplace. We asked our survey respondents how they found the process of requesting reasonable adjustments at work. And 46% found the adjustment process slow, not good, or non-existent. So again, showcasing that there's work to be done here, prioritising clearer, more accessible processes will make a really meaningful difference, I think, for nearly half of the respondents, certainly in this survey. But I think more generally, the tools to support employers and managers with that process and therefore disabled employees feeling like they can engage with and feel safe within that process is something we're going to again look at in modules 2 and 3. So if I was going to ask you to reflect now around the word disabled, whether that's changed for you or not, that's something that we always do at the end of each session. Again, feel free to share in the chat. We're not asking for any personal information. It's not mandatory. We also do have a feedback form and a survey that we would love you to fill in, that we've pulled together, Adriana and the team at Inclusion in Finance, so that we can implement any feedback and take on board for modules 2 and 3. So there's a QR code on the screen now. If you would like to fill out the feedback form, we would be incredibly grateful because it really will, again, feed into what we'll see in modules 3 and 4. I'm just going to leave that there for a couple of seconds. And then I've got some information for you on modules 2 and 3.
There's nothing in the chat apart from somebody saying that they're on leave for module 2. Oh, Adriana's replied already, so that's okay.
Brilliant. Yeah, I believe it's going to be, the webinar is going to be on the portal as well. Okay.
And they've just popped the feedback form also in the chat So I think that you can go on to the next slide now.
Brilliant. So module 2 is coming up on the 25th of June. It is an hour and a half, and it will be a session around how we make workplace accessible and creating environments for everyone to thrive. So we'll be looking at what actually is a reasonable adjustment, an accessibility requirement, who are they for? We'll be breaking down more of the workplace barriers that exist within organizations. And we'll be looking at inclusive workplace design, so beyond compliance towards culture shift, which again, talking about creating that psychological safety and trust for people to disclose, engage, and benefit from reasonable adjustments. We'll also be talking about standardizing reasonable adjustments, but also I think reactive versus proactive, things like feedback loops, tackling things like budgets. There is a general assumption that accessibility is really expensive or has to be structural and whole-scale organizational in terms of change. But as Rachel, who will be the facilitator, will speak to this in module 2, the average reasonable adjustment, I think, costs about £75. And there are so many things that fall within reasonable adjustment or accessibility requirements in the workplace that are very simple, very inexpensive to facilitate for employees. So we'll be talking a lot more about that, supporting line managers in the role of driving workplace inclusion, and then again looking at real world insight from survey and sector-based experience. We have been interviewing some brilliant people who've come forward to be part of the research that we've done specifically for modules 2 and 3. Again, people from member companies within Inclusion in Finance. So we'll be seeing snapshots of some of the conversations we'd be having with people, real people working in the industry, working in companies, sharing their perspectives and experience, which will be really beneficial to hear. And then module 3, which will be in September. This will be an hour, and it will be around supporting people or somebody in a team with a new or existing disability. So again, thinking about disclosure, thinking about what responsibilities lay with HR managers or the individuals themselves, removing kind of attitudinal barriers, best practice to manage disclosure respectfully. Different approaches, building on module 2 to put adjustments in place. So maybe looking at different case studies or examples of what that might look like for an individual. And the impact of disability diagnosis and how it affects employees at work. Again, there'll be scenario-based discussions and tools for supporting colleagues, as well as signposting and resources. So if you'd like to sign up for these sessions, I'm sure Adriana's put the links in the chat, but also there is a QR code here, and we would love to see you in June and September if you can join us. But again, they will be on the portal as webinars with condensed accessible PDFs afterwards as well. And then lastly, if you'd like to join the Inclusion in Finance community, get involved, or as Adam said, if you've been inspired by anything today and want to do more work with Adam, Adriana, Annie and the team at Inclusion in Finance, please scan this QR code. We've got so many QR codes coming at you to find out more information. And please do email Adriana at inclusioninfinance.com or myself, emma.gardner@withnot4.co.uk if you have any further questions or requirements after this session.